So tell me if you've ever been in this scenario. Your teacher or your professor announces that you have a test in 1 week. Now, as usual, you don't start studying until like 2 days before the test, and when you do sit down to study, you don't even know where to begin. Do you read the textbook again? Do you look over your notes? Did you even take notes? Does any of this sound familiar? If so, then you are in the right spot, because I'm going to teach you a study technique that will remove the chaos. It's called the Feynman Technique, and if you're not using it already, then you need to start. Hi, I'm Katie Azevedo of schoolhabits.com. I'm a private executive function coach who teaches students and professionals strategies to learn and work smarter. I'd love for you to join me over on Instagram. Please like and subscribe here on YouTube. And for a transcript of this video and for hundreds of other tutorials on study habits and all that type of stuff, then head on over to schoolhabits.com. Now, anything that I mention in this video, including the transcript, is linked below in the description box. So, the Feynman Technique. What is it? It's half study technique and half study process, if you will. And there are 4 steps. Now I'm gonna list all 4 steps really quickly right now, but then after that, we're gonna dive into how to execute each of the 4 steps and what they would really look like in real life, okay? So the 4 steps of the Feynman Technique are: number 1, choose a topic to learn and study it. Number 2, teach the topic to a child. Number 3, identify the gaps in your understanding and then go back to study those missing pieces. And 4, summarize, simplify, and organize your material. Now, each of the 4 steps of the Feynman Technique has a rationale behind it. It has a purpose as to what cognitively happens in our brains when we're trying to learn new material. Now, what this really means is that you should follow all of the steps in the order that I outline them, okay? So don't skip around. I'm gonna teach you how to repeat the Feynman Technique throughout even the course of like studying for one test. So you might go through cycles of the Feynman Technique, but you don't wanna skip any steps, all right? Now, before I go into each of the 4 steps, I need you to understand how the Feynman Technique, or how the Feynman study processes, I more like to think of it, fits into an overall study plan. So first, the Feynman Technique will not work if you don't make time for each and every one of the 4 steps. Each of the 4 steps that I just rattled off, and then I'm gonna dive into in a little bit, does take time to do and to plan and to execute, okay? You absolutely cannot pull off the Feynman Technique the night before a test as part of like a, oh shoot, I forgot to study night before test cramming session. It does not work that way. There needs to be some intention behind it and some planning. Depending on the complexity of the material that you're studying, you might need between a couple of days or a couple of weeks to get through the Feynman Technique once, or more than one time. As I mentioned earlier, it's something that you'll cycle through probably more than one time. Now, second, this gets a little bit weird, and in all my research on, when I was planning this video and how am I gonna explain the Feynman Technique, there's like nothing out there that touches on what I'm gonna share with you right now, which is that you actually have to prepare for step 1. In other words, you can't even begin step 1 of the Feynman Technique without doing a couple things beforehand. Now remember, the first step of the Feynman Technique is to choose a topic and study it. But in order for this to even happen, there's a couple things that you need to do first. Number 1, you gotta figure out what's on the test. Sometimes your teacher is gonna give you a study guide, but sometimes not. Number 2, you need to organize and consolidate your materials. So your materials would be your slides from your teacher, textbooks, notes, readings, anything like that. You need to organize and consolidate them so that they're all in one spot for you to pull information from, for you to make your study materials, which is actually the 3rd step here. You need to make your active recall study materials. Now, for example, that would be something like flashcards, because you don't study from the textbook, you don't study from your notes, you make study materials from those sources. All of those things need to happen before you even dive into step 1 of the Feynman Technique. Okay, and that's something that I feel like might be a roadblock for anybody who's tried the Feynman Technique before and is like, it didn't work, I didn't know how to do it. Well, was there preparation ahead of time? Because step 1 is just like, pick something and study it. But there's a process there. Does that make sense? And I'm gonna get into a little bit more of that in this video too. So after you do these things, okay, then you can jump into step 1 of the Feynman Technique. Again, what was step 1? Choose a topic and study it. So this is actually where things get even funkier, because I would say this is probably actually the number 1 reason why people get stuck on the Feynman Technique, other than the one that I just mentioned, okay, which is not preparing for it, is that step 1 is telling you to study the material. But most people don't even know how to study. And if you're watching this video, I'm gonna venture to say that maybe that's you. Okay, or maybe you're using passive recall study methods, so you're thinking you're studying, but you're not, but you're spending a lot of time like assuming the position of a student, right? But you're not actually studying. You have to know how to study before you do step 1 of the, well, as you do step 1 of the Feynman Technique. Does that make sense? And that's where most people get stuck. So again, step 1 is great, study the material, but that is really not helpful for anyone who hasn't been taught how to study. So if you're watching this video and you're like, oh, that's me, I got you, hold up. I have so many, we're talking like hundreds of resources on schoolhabits.com and actually here on YouTube as well that teach you how to study. Tried and true study methods for vocabulary, for high school, for college, for even graduate school, for every single possible reason that you need to be studying. I have resources and tutorials on schoolhabits.com and YouTube. I want you to go there. I will, in the description box, list some of my most popular resources if you're looking for a place to start. So that's gonna help you get started with how to study. And let me just cut to the chase here right now. You need to study using active recall. Okay? And if you're stuck on what active recall is, or you're like, shoot, I've heard that before, but I'm not sure, you bet a link in the description box will take you to the tutorial on active recall. Now, do you remember the first step earlier in the video where I said, before you even get to step 1 of the Feynman Technique, you need to organize and consolidate your material so that you can make study guides, right? I'm talking like actually go and gather your things so you have a pile of things in front of you that you can make study resources from. You might have teacher slides posted in your learning management system. You might have your own notes in a notebook. You might have PDF readings or whatever. The goal is to grab all of those and bring them to one central location. That's important. Next, from these resources that you literally have in front of you, you're going to make study materials. Your study materials are going to become the actual thing that you study from using active recall. Of course, I mentioned earlier flashcards. That's like the most basic, traditional, but arguably one of the most effective ways to study most materials, and it uses active recall. So you've organized your materials, you've made your study resources. Okay, now comes the next part, the hard part, which is technically step 1 of the Feynman Technique, study. This is the studying part. Using your flashcards or whatever other active recall method that you've made, okay, you need to put in the cognitive effort required to learn new information. Yes, this is hard. Yes, it sometimes hurts your brain, but studying, it is uncomfortable. But like, we just need to expect that and then roll with it, okay? So when you're actually like using your, I keep gonna say flashcards because it's the easiest thing to roll off the tip of my tongue. But when you're actually studying, you need to be thinking about the concepts, speaking the concepts out loud, writing them out, drawing them, teaching them to somebody else, repeating that, going forwards and backwards. So right, this is the flashcards in both directions. It is supposed to be challenging, but you need to like get gritty and play with the material and chew on it. I know that I'm using weird ways to describe studying. I am so aware of that. But those are the words that I have, okay? And I feel like you get me. I feel like you know what I'm saying. You have to work with it. So learning things requires output, not just input, not just rewatching the video, looking over your notes, or rereading the textbook. That's all bringing information in. True learning and studying requires us outputting. So that's speaking it, writing it, drawing it, teaching it to somebody else, thinking it, of course, but that's like doing something with the material and taking it out of us. If we can't articulate it or write it or explain it to somebody else, then we don't know it ourselves. That's the true test. If you know something, you should be able to explain it. If you can't explain it, you don't know it. Now, when you're studying your material, you want to plan to study in short, frequent study sessions, 20 to 25 minutes up to maybe 45 minutes max, okay? Spaced out over several days, not one big long study session, multiple study sessions spaced out over a period of at least a week if you can. I know teachers don't always give you that much advance notice, but if you can, at least a week. This is tapping into the power of spaced repetition, which, of course, I have a tutorial for that linked down below as well. Okay, so step 2 of the Feynman technique is to teach the material to a child. As odd as this is, there is a lot of common sense and science behind it. Now, when we speak to children, we modify our language and simplify what we're saying so that they can understand us, right? We all do this. Now, the cool thing is, if we don't understand the material ourselves, then we're gonna be unable to simplify the concepts that we're studying into childlike language. And this is good information for us to know. We need to know that. We need to know if we know the material or not. So here's what this process could look like in real life. Find a child. If you can't find a child, find someone who isn't familiar with the material. And if you can't find somebody because you're doing this totally solo, find a pillow, find a plant. Number 3, one concept at a time. Explain the idea in a way that the other person can understand it. Yes, speak out loud even if you're talking to a pillow or a plant. Number 4, if you're unable to clearly articulate the ideas you're learning, you don't know them well enough. Similarly, if the other person doesn't understand the ideas that you're explaining, you don't know them well enough yet. And then number 5, take note of the words, concepts, and ideas that you're unable to explain clearly, because you're going to need them for the next step. Now, what is the next step? Step 3 of the Feynman technique is to identify the gaps in your understanding and to go back and study those missing pieces. To study more efficiently, it does make sense to only study what you don't know, right? It's a good feeling to study what we know, and it can make us feel falsely confident and good about ourselves. But doing that is not gonna help you learn the material you need to learn or get a good grade on the test. Now, once you've created a list of the things and the material and the concepts and ideas that you weren't able to fully articulate clearly, then now is when you go back and you're gonna wanna study those missing pieces. So here are some ways that you could do that. Number 1, you could write out the concepts multiple times in your notebook. Repetition is magic. Does it matter if it's a digital notebook or paper notebook? Absolutely not. Number 2, draw or write the concepts on a whiteboard. Number 3, use your flashcards in reverse. You should actually be doing that anyways. And then number 4, you could use the blurting method, which is when you put the concept on the top of a piece of paper and then you blurt or you write down everything you possibly know about that topic. It doesn't need to be in any sequential order. You just write down anything that's related as it comes up. So step 4 of the Feynman technique is to summarize, simplify, and organize all of your materials and all of the information. Now, the trick is to organize and reduce and consolidate all of this information into a format that's easy to return to and review over time or whenever you need it again. Now, the 2 simplest ways to do this, we can overcomplicate everything. Please don't do that. I'm known to do that. Don't do that. 2 simplest ways to do this are simple Google Doc or a piece of paper or a notebook. Now, the goal of this step is to create one final product that contains all of the information that you studied in a very sort of at a glance, easy to look at, portable format that's actually gonna serve you in the future. Now, you could do this several different ways. One way is to start with one concept at a time. You would write it at the top of the page or type it at the top of the page, and then define it or explain it in the simplest way possible. And at this point of the Feynman technique, you've already done that verbally in your efforts to explain it to someone else, right, in the last step. So now you're writing it down. And then you would move on to the next concept, reduce, simplify it into the smallest, tightest little explanation possible, and write that down. You could do it where it's like a split page if you wanted, so kind of like the look of a 2-column notes. So it's the word on one side and the definition or the explanation in another, or you could just do it going from top to bottom, word, explanation, it doesn't matter. You can format it however you want to. One strategy, if you're using Google Docs, I would suggest adding a table of contents so that it's easy to navigate, because depending on the material and the complexity of it, this final product, it's supposed to be short and consolidated, but if there's just a lot of material that you have to get through, then your final product here is going to be a little bit bigger. And in a Google Doc, it can be helpful to add a table of contents. you highlight the word, and then up at the top of the toolbar, you change it from normal text to heading. Okay, there's like heading 1, 2, 3. I personally use heading 2, but whatever. And anytime you change text to a heading, it automatically creates sort of a table of contents along the left-hand side. At least that's how it works at the time that I'm recording this video. Okay, whether you're using Google Docs or paper, you want to make this as clear as possible to your future self. That might mean diagrams, that might mean images, it might mean using analogies. So if you have a really quirky way of remembering something using an analogy, and it helps for you, then you do that, okay? This is supposed to work for you. Because you are taking everything that you have studied over the course of, several days, and you are reducing it into this package that you can review regularly to keep the content top of mind, assuming you're gonna need it later. So let's say that you use the Feynman Technique to study for a unit, and that you know that information on your unit test is eventually gonna be on a final exam. Then this little package of study materials is going to be so valuable to your future self, particularly over the course of like a semester. You're going to have several of these little packages that come time for your midterm or your final. You're going to be so glad that you took the work and the time to do this. Trust me, trust me. And then your top performing students, which is you, obviously, you're not going to wait until the week before your final exam before you pull out these little packages of study materials, right, and review them. No, you're going to be reviewing them regularly. That's the key to studying less, is to review things along the way. Listen, the Feynman Technique does work. It's a great way to structure your study sessions and your study plan in a way that ensures you really know the content. Now, if you start the Feynman Technique well enough in advance, which you should be, then you'll have time to get through several rounds of the Feynman Technique. So you go through steps 1 through 4, and then you get to the end and you can go through 1 through 4 again. Do it as many times as you need, because repetition is gold when it comes to studying. Remember, each step has a purpose. Step 1, which is choose a topic and study it, gets you using the active recall study method, which is the only way to study. Step 2, which is to teach it to a child, tests your comprehension, which is exactly what you want. Step 3, focus on the gaps, forces you to confront what you don't know. And as much as that's uncomfortable, that is also what we want. And then step 4, which is summarize, simplify, and organize, helps you consolidate large amounts of material into something reasonable that you can review regularly. I hope that was helpful. I hope you try it and actually take action on it. I mean, I love that you're watching this video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But I want you to leave here and implement it, because the magic is in the action. Am I right? I'm right. Anyways, I'm Katie Azevedo. You can find me on schoolhabits.com or on Instagram @schoolhabits. And as always, thank you so much for watching.